Hello friends. So in today's module, we'll talk about nature of personality. By the end of this session, you will be able to define and articulate the concept of personality, distinguish between stable personality traits and temporary emotional states or behavioral tendencies, identify and describe the fundamental units of personality or components of personality, explain the key characteristics that define personality, analyze and discuss the various factors that shape and influence personality development. So let us begin with an example of Dhairya. Dhairya is a 10-year-old girl who stays mostly silent, preferring the company of a book over noisy conversations. As the extended family gathers for lunch, an uncle offhandedly says, "She is just shy, she will come around when she grows up." This comment made Dhairya's older cousin, who is a psychologist, to step in. The cousin said, "Actually, Dhairya is not shy, she is introverted. Shyness has an element of anxiety or fear in social situations, whereas introversion is a stable personality trait, reflecting a preference for lower outer stimulation and inward focus. It's a pattern of behavior, not just a snapshot." She continued to explain that personality is relatively enduring over time, which means that it would stay the same at the age of 10, 30, 65 years of age, and yet it is context sensitive. We don't act the same way at a party as we do in a classroom, but our underlying dispositions remain. She continued to explain with a metaphor to clarify. Some people are like lakes, steady, calm, deep, revealing their depths slowly. Others are like waterfalls, bold, loud, and immediately captivating, impossible to ignore. Neither is better, just different expressions of personality. Looking at personality, the word personality comes from the Latin word persona, which means a mask that was worn by theatre artists. The enduring configuration of characteristics and behavior, which comprises the individual's unique adjustment to life, including major traits, interests, drives, values, self-concept, abilities, and emotional patterns, has been the definition that has been given by American Psychological Association to personality. Other definitions include one by Allport, which says personality is the dynamic organization within the individual of those psychophysical systems that determine his characteristics, behavior, and thought. So personality determines the characterizing feature of an individual in terms of their behavior, in terms of their thought, in terms of their emotions. The characteristics or blend of characteristics that make a person unique has been another definition of personality. A more comprehensive definition of personality is that it is an individual's unique variation on the general evolutionary design for human nature, expressed as a developing pattern of dispositional traits, characteristic adaptations, and integrative life stories, complexly and differentially situated in culture. Now let us consider some of the units or elements of personality. Personality comprises of traits which are stable characteristics or tendencies in a person's behavior. For example, a person may be characterized by honesty, extroversion, impulsivity, and their behavior would be a reflection of these underlying traits. Another component of personality is motive. These are internal drives or needs that direct behavior towards certain goals. There can be diverse needs in an individual, like need for achievement, affiliation, power, and they all influence or they all reflect the personality of the individual. Temperament is another unit which refers to biologically based tendencies that appear early in life and are relatively stable. For example, being easygoing, reactive, or shy. It's the raw material of personality, especially very clearly observable in infants and children. Cognition is another unit of personality, which is basically the thought patterns, perceptions, and beliefs that influence how a person interprets the world and makes decisions. For example, if a person has the fundamental belief that the world is not a trusting place or it is dangerous, then the way of behavior of that person will be determined to a large extent by these underlying fundamental beliefs. So we have covered till now the definition of personality and the components of personality. Now we shall be discussing the nature and characteristics of personality. The first characteristic of personality which stands out if you look at all the definitions of personality is consistency and stability. As we know that personality is not something that changes very frequently. Personality shows consistent pattern of thought, emotion and behavior across time and situations. So, across situations, if a person has a particular type of personality or a particular trait of personality, across situations that trait would be exhibited or expressed. It is relatively enduring but not rigid. So, when we say that it is enduring or stable over a period of time, it does not mean that it is completely inflexible or cannot change. Sometimes major life events can lead to lasting or profound changes. For example, a person who is very happy-go-lucky or very cheerful experiences significant trauma in life wherein they lose their parents, and because of which they have to take major responsibility in life and gradually become more calm and more stable and more introverted. Another characteristic of personality includes uniqueness and individuality. When we look at personality, one of the most clear or distinctive aspect of it is that it is unique to every individual. So, no two people have the exact same personality. They might have the same configuration of trait. They might have the same set of traits, but the extent of that trait, the exhibition or the expression of that trait, the maturity of that trait will be different, and therefore, the entire system of personality will be different for every individual. This uniqueness is shaped by a mix of biology, experience and context that we will cover when we do the factors affecting personality. Another characteristic of personality is its contextual expression, which we have briefly mentioned. So, personality is expressed differently across situations, at work, with family or in unfamiliar settings. Despite this variation, core patterns remain stable. So, it is enduring and stable, but the expression of personality would vary depending upon the situation in which one is. Personality is situationally responsive, but not situationally defined. So, you cannot change your personality in different situations, but the expression of personality will differ across situations. There are another characteristic of personality is multimodal expression, which means that personality expresses itself in multiple forms. How you carry yourself, how you dress, the tone of your voice, speech patterns, values, attitudes, emotional expression, body language, all these are ways in which personality would manifest or express itself. Now, for example, a person who tends to be more anxious or is more prone to anxiety speaks a little faster as compared to a person who is more laid back and relaxed. Personality is also integrated and dynamic system. When we say integrated and dynamic system, it means that integrated because it comprises of a number of elements, components or units that we just discussed, and it is dynamic because it is not static. It would keep changing, it would keep evolving. Personality is a psychophysical system involving traits, temperament, intellect, character and motives. It is both psychological and biological, and hence psychophysical system, which is rooted in brain and hormonal systems. These elements are interconnected, forming a coherent and organized whole. Personality is also conscious, adaptive and evolving. Personality is conscious and self-reflective. It develops through our interactions with the environment. So, one of the definitions of personality says that it is your unique adaptation to the environment. The self concept here plays a key role in shaping the personality of the individual. Personality has potential for change. It can reorganize under certain conditions, like for example, when the person is taking therapy or when the person undergoes certain crucial life shifts. Though stable, it is a dynamic, evolving system. Now, let us consider some of the factors that impact personality or personality development. Let us go back to Dhairya again when we look at these various factors that impact personality and see that how Dhairya's personalities would have been shaped by these factors. The first factor is the biological foundation. So, in the biological foundation, the role of genetics, brain chemistry, nervous system reactivity is paramount, and it contributes to core personality traits. Being born with a more sensitive nervous system and lower tolerance for sensory stimulation may have inclined Dharya towards introversion. So because sensory stimulation, the need for sensory stimulation was lesser in Dharya, she would prefer calm environments and needed time to recharge after social interaction. Early life experiences also play a major role in shaping personality of an individual. Childhood attachment patterns, parenting style, and early relational experiences shape how personality develops. For example, if Dharya had caregivers who respected her need for space and didn't push her to be overly social, she might have grown up with a secure sense of self as an introvert. Alternatively, if her quietness was constantly criticized, it might contribute to anxiety or low self-esteem. Parenting style has a significant impact on the development of personality, and a number of studies have been done that show that different parenting styles lead to different kinds of personality development in children. For example, authoritative parenting, which is the right balance of responsiveness and demandingness, is associated with positive outcomes in children's personality. Studies have shown that authoritative parenting is linked to traits like openness to experience, conscientiousness, while being negatively related to neuroticism. Likewise, authoritarian parenting, which is highly demanding parenting, is associated with increased neuroticism and a lower level of overall well-being. So when parents are very controlling or very demanding, their children tend to develop neurotic traits. When children of permissive parents who are neither high in demandingness or are very overindulgent, that is associated with difficulties in self-regulation and social skills in children. Neglectful or uninvolved parenting is associated with difficulties in personality development, and it is also related to a number of other mental health issues in children. This third set of factors that influences personality is the social role of the individual and their identity development. The roles people occupy and how they see themselves within those roles influence how personality traits are expressed. For example, as Dharya grows, she might take on roles like that of a mentor to her younger cousins or being a creative thinker in a school group, where her quiet nature becomes an asset. These experiences could help her integrate her introversion into a strong, self-aware identity. There are other cultural and social influences on the shaping of personality. Culture defines norms around behavior, emotional expression, and values. These shape how people around us view personality. For example, in a collectivist family culture, where sociability is equated with being good or normal, Dharya's introversion may be misread as hostility or arrogance or seen as a flaw. The cousin's correction shows an emerging cultural shift that multiple personality expressions are valid. With respect to culture and personality, studies have shown that individualistic cultures that place high value on independence and personal achievement, for example America, and collectivistic culture which value group harmony and interdependence, for example many Asian countries like India, the personality development would be different. In an individualistic culture, there is emphasis on self, independence, autonomy of the individual. They focus more on their personal goals and achievements, and therefore they see themselves as more assertive, and they are more likely to express their personal opinions and stand out from the group. On the other hand, if you look at the individuals in the collectivistic culture, where group harmony is valued more or interdependence is valued more over independence, individuals view themselves as members of a larger group or community, such as their family or workplace. They prioritize group goals and cooperation and are more likely to make decisions that benefit the group as a whole. In these cultures, you would find that people who respect others and conformity to group norms is seen as a necessary aspect of personality. So thus, we see that culture influences personality development in a big way. Life events and transitions are another set of factors. We discussed that when we were talking about the nature of personality as enduring. Significant life experiences like trauma, loss, success, moving cities, moving countries even, can reshape aspects of personality over time. If Dharya recently got discovered by her teacher for a talent, was highly appreciated, she would become more interested to join the talent group and socialize more with like-minded students. Over time, such events could make her more interactive and comfortable in niche social circles despite her basic introversion. On the other hand, if Dhairya was misunderstood, criticized or faulted at for exhibiting introversion, chances are that she would have become more withdrawn. Another set of factors that influence personality is cognitive and emotional pattern. So how people think about themselves, what do they tell themselves and about the world, and how they regulate their emotions strongly influences their personality. If Dhairya tends to internalize comments like you are too quiet, you are too withdrawn, you are too unsociable, then she might develop self-consciousness or anxiety in social settings. However, if she reframes her quietness and realizes that there is a thoughtful observation in her quietness, she may develop a confident introverted identity. Gender and personality has also been researched. Gender, as we know, is a social construct, and there are different perspectives on looking at gender. The essentialist perspective looks at men and women differently, and they say that men and women differ inherently in personality due to biological factors. There are examples of studies that are conducted with the essentialist lens, where studies have shown that women score higher on certain traits like openness, agreeableness, neuroticism. Women are more empathetic, cooperative, emotionally intense, whereas men show more conventional thinking, lower empathy, and higher competitiveness and antagonism. On the other hand, there is a social role perspective which says that gender differences are shaped by social expectations and roles and not inherent traits. So when gender stereotypes are not made salient in these studies, differences between men and women, for example in empathy, largely disappear. Gender as a socio-cultural perspective influences personality of individuals. The socio-cultural expectations shape the personality development accordingly. For example, boys are socialized or raised to be more aggressive and be tough, whereas girls are raised to be more nice and adjusting. Intelligence and personality also are related, but their relationship is complex and bidirectional, which means that intelligence influences personality, personality influences intelligence. Research suggests that cognitive ability, especially general intelligence, is moderately associated with certain personality traits. And one of the most important traits that stands out in terms of its relationship with intelligence is openness to experience. Openness to experience, one of the big 5 personality traits, encompasses curiosity, creativity, and a preference for novelty, is moderately correlated with general mental ability. Another study found that higher intelligence in early life was associated with higher conscientiousness and lower neuroticism in adulthood. A recent study, meta-analytic study by Stanek and Vance 2023 has shown that neuroticism predicted lower levels of intelligence. Likewise, conscientiousness, a measure of self-regulation and orderliness, correlated positively with overall intelligence. Now, as I've already mentioned, that with respect to intelligence and personality, one core trait of personality that gets associated with intelligence is openness, and neuroticism is negatively associated with intelligence. However, one must notice that it is certain facet of personality like intellectual curiosity explain the relationship between intelligence and personality more than the broader trait. Heredity and personality are also related, so which means that personality is heritable. It is passed down genetically across generations. Research methods that are used to study the influence of heredity on personality include twin studies, adoption studies, and other family studies. They help us estimate genetic versus environmental contribution. Most findings from these studies suggest 40 to 50% of personality traits are heritable across different models. Genetic influence is consistent across cultures and applies to both stability and change in personality over time. If you look at the bar graph, you would see that Each trait shows moderate genetic influence with heritability ranging from about 0.42 to 0.4, reinforcing the idea that personality is shaped by both genes and environment. So, in this lecture, we talked about the definition of personality, which was defined mostly as a stable yet adaptable traits shaped by a mix of internal and external influences. The key units of personality, traits, motives, cognitions, temperament help us describe, predict and explain individual behavior. Personality is consistent, unique, context sensitive and emerges as an integrated system influenced by both biological and socio-cultural processes. Factors shaping personality include heredity, environment, parenting, early life experiences, culture, family experiences and peer interactions. Gender and intelligence also intersects with personality. Critically examining these factors allows us to move beyond essentialist views to include social and cultural context in understanding personality. Thank you so much for listening.